Yeah, Nadal plays the game with a lot of brute force and aggression and power, but isn't tennis supposed to be a gentleman's sport? I mean, isn't he sort of an embarrassment to the sport?
I'm not gonna lie to you. That's probably one of the stupidest comments. You cannot deny that Nadal is the greatest tennis player of all time.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Bobcast. Thank you for all your support last week on the videos, and let us know in the comments if you want to see more tennis videos. So today we have our tennis analyst, Jag, with us.
What's up, everyone?
So, Jag, you've just seen the outcome of the French Open final with Nadal beating Djokovic. He's now tied Federer for the all-time record 20 Grand Slams. But a lot of people still think Federer is the undisputed greatest of all time tennis player. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I have immense respect for Federer. You know, he's been the undisputed GOAT for quite some time. And, you know, he changed the game when he came into tennis. And it's been an honor watching him play the sport. But I think after this win, we really need to call into question this undisputed GOAT status. Nadal now ties Federer in the most amount of Grand Slams. And I think the main argument against Nadal right now, and, you know, that's always been the main arguments against Nadal, is that he hasn't had all-court success, right? People think about him as just a clay player. And it's true, he is, without question, the greatest clay player to have ever played the game, with 13 French Open titles. Wow. I think the next person who even comes closest to that is Borg, who has like 6 or 7, right? So it's clear that, you know, a good majority of Nadal's wins are on clay. But I think that shouldn't diminish the argument for Nadal being the GOAT. Let me tell you why. When we compare both Federer and Nadal in their primes at their best, one of them, and only one of them, was successful against the other. Federer has never beaten Nadal at Roland Garros, ever. However, in the greatest game of all time, this is, you know, well regarded as, if not the greatest, one of the greatest games of all time, the 2008 Wimbledon. Nadal beat Federer on grass, which is Federer's best court, right? And he beat it in the greatest game ever. So what that means is Nadal has beaten Federer in his prime on his best court, whereas Federer hasn't even beaten Nadal at his best tournament. Forget about in his prime. Forget about, you know, in his at the greatest game ever. Forget about that. He just hasn't beaten Nadal. And I think because of that, you have to at least, if you're going to put Federer at 1, you have to also put Nadal at 1. Personally, I think it's time to say that they're either tied or Nadal is now the GOAT of tennis.
Well, you brought up some good points, how Nadal has been especially dominant at Roland Garros. But Federer has a winning record head-to-head against Nadal on all other surfaces except clay. So what is your response to that?
I think that's like one of the laziest arguments you can make. You know, you can't just take out Nadal's best court and say, well, if it wasn't for this one court, Federer would be better. No, tennis is played on clay, grass, and hard courts. You have to include all three, right? If we take out all the matches against Federer and Nadal on grass court, right, then we can see that Nadal would be better, right? Nadal still has success. And right now, if we just look at all their matchups, if I'm not mistaken, Nadal has the head-to-head record. But the difference is Nadal can still beat Federer on grass. Like, if you look at the tennis players, right, like what their thoughts are on Djokovic, Federer, Nadal, like the big three, they all say Nadal is literally a god on clay. Like, he cannot be beat. That's like their words. Like, if you just watch videos of, like, you know, tennis players commenting on the greatness, they all recognize, of course, Federer's an insane player, the greatest who has ever lived, calling into question obviously now. But every single one of them saying Nadal cannot be beat on clay. Like, that's how they talk about Nadal. No one says, like, Federer cannot be beat on grass, right? Like, no one says, like, you know, if Djokovic and Federer are versing, no one can say, like, okay, Djokovic has no chance. Like people literally believe Nadal is literally unbeatable at Roland Garros. And that level of dominance should not be an argument against Nadal. That level of dominance, if anything, should only be a strength of Nadal's case for the greatest of all time.
So you brought up some great points about how Nadal was excellent on clay, but you also mentioned how we should take into account their peak performance. So if you measure Federer and Nadal in their 5 peak years, from Federer it's most likely from age 22 to 26, whereas Nadal it's most likely 23 to 27. In those peak years, Federer won 12 Grand Slams, 4 ATP Finals titles, 29 big titles, 49 total titles, and spent 204 weeks as the number one. Nadal, on the other hand, only won 8 Grand Slam titles and only spent 94 weeks as the world's number one. So if Federer had the greater peak, the greater 5 year performance peak, shouldn't Federer have the advantage over Nadal in this area?
That's a great point, Ronit, and I'm actually glad you brought that up. There's one answer to that, and that's competition. There's, I think, about a 5 year gap between Federer and Nadal. The years that you listed off, what did you say, 23 to 27?
Yep.
Right? For Federer, right? 23 to 27. Nadal's like 5 years younger, so he was what? 18 years old? 18 years old. Do you think an 18-year-old could match Federer in his prime? No. He couldn't do it. Federer did not have the competition that Nadal had when he was in his prime. Because when Nadal was in his prime, Federer was still an insane player. Federer's still an insane player right now, and he's like 38. Or I think he might even be, I think he's 40. I don't know. He's 38, 39, 40, around that age, right? So Nadal was 18 when Federer was entering his prime, as you define his prime, right? But Nadal, when he was in his prime, Federer was still a beast. And you know who else was a freaking beast at that time? Novak Djokovic. See, Nadal had to play Federer when Federer was in his prime. And Nadal had to play Djokovic when Djokovic was in his prime. And Nadal beat both of those guys when they were in his prime. So you can't just look at, what were their best years? Because, yeah, Federer did have a great stretch of years. And I think that's why he has such a buildup of being the GOAT, because he had a 5 year advantage, right? Like, we've never seen someone play the game that amazing. And so he had 5 years more than both Novak and Nadal had, where he could, make his case as a GOAT through his performances. Now, Nadal didn't have those 5 years because he was just 5 years younger. So everything is just delayed. You're telling me that in 5 years, Nadal won't surpass Federer in terms of titles, or if they played at different times, or if the times were swapped, that Nadal wouldn't also have those titles? So the argument with Federer's dominance, I think, is just unfair because of the difference in competition that Nadal and Federer face. And this is, again, not any disrespect towards Federer. I'm trying to be as unbiased as possible, knowing that Nadal is my favorite player. But I've always recognized Federer as the GOAT, despite Nadal being my favorite player. But I just think at this point, the arguments for Federer are just getting lazier and lazier. Right now, the only argument, that people still spout out is just like he's old and he's still playing, right?
Well, you bring up age, but age can also work in Federer's favor. He's also the oldest world number one. He's, like you mentioned, playing against some of the greatest players ever at age 38 and is still holding his own. And not only that, he's still playing the game beautifully.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. And I think there was a time when people doubted Federer, that he couldn't come back, and then he made just a massive resurgence a couple of years ago. And he won the titles again. He started winning Grand Slams again, and it was amazing to do it at that age. But last time I checked, time is still a thing. And Nadal still has the time to be the world's oldest number one, right? Nadal is 5 years younger. And let's not forget the difference in playing styles. When Nadal first started playing, many analysts said, this is not something that can, expand. This is not something that can, move Nadal to other courts. Because the way he plays the game is through pure grit and power. He doesn't play it like, the grace and beauty that Federer plays it, right? Nadal plays it through pure just beast mentality. hitting harder, hitting stronger, hitting with more spin, and that's why he's so dominant on clay. And many analysts said he won't be able to keep this up for many years. Like he can only do this for a few years. Eventually he's just gonna like burn out, and no human, no athlete can keep on playing with this aggressive style, very taxing on the body. But Nadal did. Nadal played this hard style, and he's now matched Federer in the amount of Grand Slams while playing harder competition, while still having the higher head-to-head against Federer. So I think, yes, it's amazing that Federer was able to play for such a long time, but the 2 points of Nadal's playing style is just harder, and also Nadal can still, reclaim that from Federer. Not reclaim it, claim it from Federer, right? We still have 5 more years. We don't know what Nadal can do. People have counted him out before, and
You said Nadal plays the game with a lot of passion and power and aggression. But isn't tennis a gentleman's sport of beauty and elegance and grace? I mean, some people say that Nadal is almost an embarrassment to the sport.
I'm not gonna lie to you, Ronit. That was probably the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. I don't know who you talk to, and I think this is the frustration with Nadal fans. They have to deal with like idiot analysts sucking Federer off like this. Yeah, I get it. Federer plays the game beautifully, sure. Federer has some sportsmanship awards. I think more than Nadal. I think that's a good point. But just to say something idiotic like that really just delegitimizes, the argument on Federer's side even.
I mean, he's the ambassador of tennis.
Yeah, I get that. He is an ambassador of tennis, but so is Nadal. Federer might have the larger base, but, Nadal and Federer both have been very graceful. Nadal doesn't smash rackets because he believes that there's kids out there who can't even afford certain rackets, so he would never do that, right? So he has immense respect for the sport too. Just because his playing style isn't as, maybe entertaining to watch because he adds a lot of spin doesn't take away from, the argument of him being the greatest to have ever lived. And I think these qualitative arguments for Federer are just hurting his case even more because clearly the statistics don't back it up anymore, right? The Grand Slams are tied now. The head-to-head is in Nadal's favor. Nadal has beaten Federer when it has come to the greatest.
Those are some great points. We need to wrap up here. So, what are your final thoughts about the situation?
Once again, I have immense respect for Federer. Like you say, he is the ambassador of tennis.
He is.
And he will always be remembered as one of the GOATs. But I think after this win right here, you cannot deny that Nadal is the greatest tennis player of all time.